The horror retrospective show.
Horror retrospective show.
The horror retrospective show.
Why did you decide to pick Sin Takes a Holiday?
I've always heard of it, even though I never knew anything about it. This was a first-time watch for me. I know it means more holiday in the sense of vacation, but I just kind of figured since we're coming up on Christmas time, it'd probably be a fun time to catch it.
Cool. Yeah, I've never heard of this. I didn't know anything about it going in, so I didn't expect you to pick it either. I was like, why don't you pick it? So for me, it was cool because it's a non-genre film, and I've been watching a lot of genre films recently. I really liked this one. I liked it a lot. I did think it had some flaws that I want to get into, but overall, I thought it was really entertaining. What about yourself?
Yeah, I do change it up every now and again. It was maybe a little bit more of it wasn't necessarily a chick flick. It had a lot of comedic moments in it. It wasn't quite a drama. I'm not really sure what exactly to call it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be a romantic comedy, but it didn't have a lot of overtly funny scenes consistently. It did have some humor. I think it was supposed to be a romance at the end of the day, because the drama didn't really have a lot of consequences to it for it to be just like straight drama. And I think that's part of the issue with it for me, is that the consequences weren't very high. It didn't have that extra kick that I was hoping it would have at some point, where it would like, okay, now things are picking up type vibe.
Yeah, it was a very basic plot, and I imagine, because the impression I get is that the 1930s weren't much different from nowadays, where obviously I'm really bad with names, Gaylord, he was apparently having an affair with a married woman, and then he marries his secretary to avoid having to continue with this other lady. So it's kind of like, I just want to be free and do my own thing. I'm just passing through.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I thought with a name like Gaylord and him wanting a beard for a wife, that there may have been some homosexual undertones in the film at some point, but there was none of that. It was just a coincidence that his name was Gaylord and he wanted a beard.
I'm not sure where exactly the name comes from, but yeah, I got that same impression, like he's treating her as a beard. She's the phony wife so that he can keep up appearances with the other woman, and then he still wanted to continue living as he pleased. So yeah, just in a sense, very I'm trying to avoid saying modern, but it does feel very modern in that sense, as far as the relationship between the characters.
Yeah, definitely didn't think, the premise I thought was one of the best parts of the film. I thought there were a couple of elements that really worked for me. I thought the premise was excellent. I thought the pacing was well. The movie never dragged. Part of it's too short to drag, but still some short movies can feel twice as long. And I thought the lead actress did a great job. Those were like the main three elements that stuck out to me. But the premise it's very interesting. It's like, okay, like, where is this going to go? And even if it didn't work, the movie was over before like you really questioned like, they could have did a lot more with it. Like, I didn't really, if I wasn't reviewing it, I wouldn't have like been so like kind of iffy on it. I would have probably liked it even more, because it didn't really drag at all.
No, it did move at a good pace. It did have kind of like those weird little questionable plot points, but I guess it's just more, it was a simply written plot. There really wasn't much of a subplot where I am so horrible with the characters' names.
Which character are you talking about? I kind of know their names.
What was it? Sylvia, I believe, the secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah, where she
Constance Bennett.
Yeah, where she picks up with was it Reggie? Yeah, Reggie Durant, the friend of the fake husband.
Yeah, let's get into the characters a little bit, because another thing that didn't really work for me quite that well was the character motivations. It's like, all right, like, what is it that you really want? And I think with a good film, they set up a premise that works, and this sets up a premise that works, but then you have to set up, okay, what are the characters' motivation, and how does it conflict with these other characters. And when you thought there might be conflict, it just disappeared. For instance, with Constance, like her being the main character, I wasn't quite sure what she wanted. And I guess with her, we can talk about the general premise of the film, aside from like, the marriage thing. What type of film is this? And I was like, I guess this is kind of like a Cinderella or Aladdin, like rags to riches, where there's someone poor who doesn't expect to be around these rich and elegant people suddenly gets a chance to be in that situation. But with those classic rags to riches, is they get everything they think that they want, and then it gets taken away from them, and then they kind of grow from there. Like Cinderella thinks, all right, there's no way he's gonna love me if he knows that I'm just like this like poor little girl. I'm not like rich and I have all this stuff. Same thing with Aladdin. It's like, if she knows that I'm not really rich, they're not gonna want me. But she didn't really have that moment where like she lost everything. Like, I guess she kind of went through somewhat of an arc, because after she finds out like her boss wants her, it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever, because she's in love with him, but he doesn't really want to be with her. And then I think at some point she tells her friends like, I think something to the equivalent to like, I feel like worthless, like I lost my self-worth. And I guess she gains that in Paris, but that's not really much of an arc, because that happens right at the beginning. Like when she does gain everything in Paris, there's no real adversity that she goes through at all in the film after that point. I mean, did that bother you at all, or is it just me?
Honestly, I had a lot of fun watching, kind of like, and I guess if we're comparing to films, I would say maybe it's more kind of like Pretty Woman, which, yeah, same thing, like the whole Cinderella thing where she's just kind of plucked out of a sea of many, and it just happens to be, well, you're just conveniently there. But I like how she goes around and she looks at the shops, and she discovers this whole new way of life that she's always imagined or admired, I guess is more correct. But she seemed to step into it fairly easily, kind of like she's always dreamt of this, she's always wanted this, she knew exactly what she wanted. So it's not necessarily I don't read it as she found or regained her self-worth. It's more, I think she found who she was always meant to be. And then with Reggie in tow, it's kind of like he also kind of helped push her, kind of like, go get your hair done, get a massage. Like he encouraged her to do things that the high society women do. And I think if he hadn't pushed her, then maybe she never would have done any of those things.
I agree with that, but even I was looking for that Pretty Woman moment where it's like, I forget the actor's name, but he played George Costanza. He's the one that basically breaks her down and makes her feel like a hooker again. And then she runs away from Richard Gere, and then she goes back to her little broke apartment feeling like she's worthless. And then Richard Gere has to go and then win her back. So she does kind of lose everything and goes back. Or even like a Jerry Maguire, where it's just like he marries his secretary, the same thing, or rich boss with the secretary. But even with Jerry Maguire, you had that moment where it's like, she just says, this isn't for me, I can't do this, you don't really love me. Then he has to go back into the apartment and like win her over. There wasn't that moment where she's like, okay, like I can't do this. Like for whatever reason, like she walks away. Like she does feel like, all right, maybe I'm being used. I have more pride in myself than this. And she walks away from it. And then maybe Gaylord then goes into that little tiny apartment with her and her two roommates, and in front of them he has his Richard Gere or Tom Cruise moment where he professes his love for her and then gets her back. Like I was looking for like something for her to overcome, and it really wasn't much. Like you said, she goes to Paris, she has a Pretty Woman moment, everyone loves her from like that moment in the film, which is pretty early on, and then there's zero adversity from there. It's like it lacked any kind of drama at all to it to me.
Yeah, it did move pretty quick, and then I do agree, like the resolution of the film is probably the last 15 to 20 minutes where she comes back, and it's only because she's not sure how she feels about Gaylord. So I guess she wants to make sure, she actually wants to remain in this sham marriage before moving on to Mr. Durant. And I think the off-putting thing for her was Gaylord was only interested in her because of her new clothes, whereas she's saying, well, I'm not an emperor in a new coat. I've always been this girl. You just didn't care until I got new clothes.
Yeah. And then she should have just walked away. And then maybe if he earned her love
Yeah.
back, then that would have been kind of interesting. Like, she didn't really gain that backbone of like, hey, you know what? Like, secretly, I've always wanted to be a lawyer and I'm going to be my own person. And you guys are like sociopaths that are just like passing people around. You know, it's like, I'm better than this. She didn't have that moment. She was just still that at the end of the day, just that secretary that was simping for her boss. And even when she got everything she wanted, she still ran back to him, like, do you approve of me now type thing? You know, it's like, I was looking for a little bit more from that character.
I agree. Like, it was very, very much of its time, kind of how you say, looking for the approval. And there really was no empowering moment where she just kind of steps forward. It's just she moves from one caretaker to the next, which, yeah, in the eyes of everyone else around them, it wasn't a very polite move either. But obviously Gaylord's mistress couldn't say much better, because she left her husband to be with a man that didn't want her either.
Yeah, she was actually Rita Leroy. She was actually one of the more entertaining parts. Her cattiness and the way she was kind of like, I guess, the butt of the joke a lot of times. I thought her role was pretty funny and interesting. I liked it when she was on screen. But like, her motivation, I think, was the clearest of anyone. I didn't really understand what Gaylord wanted. He got what he wanted, and just because she came back in a pretty dress, he was like, oh, now I want to get married. And even
Yeah.
with Reggie, he kind of made this speech early on in the film where he kind of indicated that I like to play in other people's yards or something like that, I think he was saying. But he's alluding to the fact that he likes to sleep with women that are taken, because then it's more interesting for him. But I thought the movie could have at least tried to use him as a villain, at least someone to like root against, or someone to take something away from like the people we want to get together. But he was just nothing but nice to her. And she was being a dick by just like, okay, now that you've made me feel like this princess and I felt like this ugly duckling, you go to the side, I'll go back to the guy that I really want. Like, that was a dick move on her part. Like, what did he do wrong? You know?
No, I agree. It's weird. Like, she was hung up on her boss all this time, and it's very rose-colored glasses. Like, she'd been around all this time. She knew exactly what type of a man he was with. She knew beforehand that he was seeing a married woman, but she got her marriage proposal and she was excited until she realized that she was just playing a beard.
Overall, though, like, I think it was mainly the material that wasn't great for the actors. I thought everyone did a good job in the role. Maybe it was a sense of direction or lacking in the script, why like things didn't come together as well as I would have liked. But overall, like I said, I still find it entertaining, and I thought Constance was great. One of the scenes that made me laugh out loud was when she first went to Paris and she's seeing everyone have fun, and then finally someone comes to dance with her. But then the two guys come and like, they're like, oh, you came, and they both left, and then she had to awkwardly sit back down. I thought her timing with that scene was hilarious. And then quickly the other guy comes in and he pretends like he knows who she is. And as soon as she walks away, he tells the waiter, get me her name. You know, that was like the peak of the movie for me, because those scenes back to back, I'm like, okay, this is starting to pick up. And then that was kind of like where it peaked out with the humor. So, any other thoughts on the film that we didn't get to that you have?
I'd say it's pretty much all the same. Same thing with you. I loved I'm horrible with names. Sorry, the woman who played the mistress. I liked her cattiness. I like how both women
Grace, yeah.
Grace. Okay, Grace Lawrence. I like how they were both kind of bothering him during the dinner party, where Gaylord and Sylvia are kind of like trying to sell this whole thing like they really like each other, and Grace is getting really jealous, and she's saying, well, you tell her we're seeing each other and get it over with. And we already know, and that's what makes it funny to me, is in the back of our minds, we already know he doesn't want you, lady.
Yeah, she was hilarious. Every time she was on screen, it was great. So, but yeah, overall, it's a good movie. It just lacked that extra gear. But when a movie is this short, like if it doesn't have that extra gear, it's not the worst thing in the world. So I definitely recommend.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with kind of the situationals. It did have not modern day situational comedy, but it was humorous. I enjoyed that, even though it moved quickly. It was a simple plot. That's mostly what held my interest, was just that little bit of information that the audience knows that the other characters don't, and it's kind of like you're in on the joke.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm assuming you'd give it a recommend as well, right?
Yeah, I would for sure.